So yeah, as Tony said, I'm going to have a bit of a chat about the CottonInfo on-farm nitrogen trial program that's been happening for the last 2 seasons, and also a little bit about the action on the ground and filling the research gap projects that have been happening kind of concurrently with the CottonInfo program. So just briefly, just a bit of background on what CottonInfo is. It's the industry joint venture for extension in cotton industry. So the three partners are Cotton Australia, the Cotton Research Development Corporation and cottonseed distributors. So the CottonInfo team is made up of the Regional Development Officers. So as Tony said, I'm based in the Gwydir, and so there's 7 of us spread around the cotton growing valleys. There's also the tech specialists. The tech specialists provide input and guide extension activities and information across a number of areas such as agronomy, water, pests and weeds, stewardship, nutrition, and the list goes on. And we also have the MyBMP team. They form a key component of delivery through the MyBMP program. And leading the team is Warwick Waters, and Ruth Redfern looks after our communications. So within the CottonInfo program, we have a number of different pathways for extending research and development to our growers. So as I said, we have the RDOs, the Regional Development Officers on the ground, who work with the local growers and consultants. They have activities such as field days, on-farm trials, produce regional newsletters, things like that. The CottonInfo website has the latest information and news. It also forms the home now of all the industry publications, so all the old CRC website documents are now at home on the CottonInfo website. We have our fortnightly e-newsletter, which alternates with the Moisture Manager. All right, an interesting little statistic that was mentioned to me the other day. If each Australian cotton farm saved 50 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, the cost of that saving would be equal to the amount spent on cotton research and development in that year. Of course, we're not asking everyone to reduce their nitrogen by 50 kilos necessarily, but it does make you stop and think that nitrogen fertiliser, it's not an insignificant cost, and any savings or improvements in efficiencies can contribute to increased profitability. I'm going to look at 4 areas today. The rate debate. Where have we moved on from the magic number, the magic rate number, and why? Is it better to be safe than sorry? So we're going to look at some of the implications of additional or luxury insurance nitrogen fertiliser. Is it a whole lot of gas? How much are we losing to the atmosphere as gas, as greenhouse gas, and when? And is it going down the drain? How much are we losing off the field in tailwater? So to understand these areas better, we built on the previous season trials in the CottonInfo program. So there were 7 trials run from Emerald through to Griffith. With the support of cooperated growers, trials were customised to work in with the whole farm management and the seasonal conditions. They were also tailored to the issues relevant to that particular valley. So they did differ slightly across the valleys. But typically there were varieties of rates in the trials, varied around the grower rate for that particular field. We conducted pre and post soil testing, in-season leaf and PDL sampling, monitoring the growth of the crop, final yields and seed nitrogen percentages. So the RDO nitrogen trial program did start initially as a rate trial. Science says that a plant needs approximately 250 kilos of nitrogen per hectare to produce a 12 to 14 bale crop. With rates higher as well as lower than this typically being applied across the valleys, we set out to test the numbers. In the 2013-14 season, and again in the 14-15 season, we looked at the nitrogen fertiliser use efficiency measure, which is kilograms of lint per kilogram of nitrogen applied. And that nitrogen applied is actually the fertiliser applied. It doesn't take into account the existing soil N. So this graph shows, is from 2014-15, and it shows in the green band the fields where the nitrogen fertiliser use efficiency fell within the recommended optimum range of 13 to 18 kilos of lint per kilo of nitrogen applied. And you can see there's a fair few in that band. And the ones that fell in that band on this graph had between 148 and 208 kilos of nitrogen applied, per hectare applied. Those above the green band could have benefited from additional N, and those below represent excessive amounts of applied nitrogen. So for those below the line, where do the opportunities lie to reduce the inputs without limiting production? So we'll have a look at a few of the results from across the valleys. In the Macquarie, the best nitrogen fertiliser use efficiency result of 15.4 kilos of lint per kilo of nitrogen applied was achieved with the 160 kilo treatment. This was nil up front and 60 applied in season, 160 applied in season, and this original soil test had 77 kilos before planting. And in this graph, you'll see 6 replicated plots and each of the replications within those plots. The line of best fit is plotted through the points highlighting there's no improvement to be gained in yield, in this case, from increasing applied N beyond the initial 160. In fact, Amanda found in the 2 seasons conducting the trials that nitrogen was not the limiting factor in either season. And this was a low-yielding season in 13-14 and a high-yielding one in 14-15, so quite a good comparison. On the Darling Downs, I will explain this slide, it's a little bit dotty. John found that the value of lint returned was in some cases actually less than the cost of the N applied. 3 out of 4 sites found no significant difference between the various N rates. So on this site, on this graph, the black and the green in the middle are flood irrigated, and the red and the blue are overhead, but the blue was affected by disease. I'll get my pointer. The stars indicate where that nitrogen fertiliser use efficiency measure hit 18. Oh, it's not on, is it? That's all right, you can see the stars. And the circles are the point at which the value of the lint being produced was exceeded by the cost of N. Oh, there we go. Oh, lost my spot, Tony. There we go. So in Deer and Bandy, the growers there recognised that keeping their management options open and allowing for responsiveness with mid-season application was important, and that was something they wanted to look at. So Sal worked with the growers there who wanted to better match their nitrogen requirement with crop use to make informed decisions on in-season applications. They did this through looking at the value of PDL testing as a management tool to inform them how much they should be applying. So leaf and PDL testing can improve confidence, and the Deer and Bandy growers felt more comfortable at the end of this project with their programs that they had a better handle on where their crop nutrition was at. None of them actually made any changes during this season, but they feel they now have the capacity, using their leaf and PDL testing next season, that they'll be able to make those decisions when they need to. So is it better to be safe than sorry? I wanted to note here that we need to remember that the crop only receives 1/3 of its required nitrogen from applied fertiliser. 2/3 comes from nitrogen mineralised from soil organic matter. So we need to know what's happening at a farm scale across the regions in terms of mineralisation. And what is the benefit of reducing these applied inputs? Is the cost of extra nitrogen fertiliser less than the risk If the cost of the extra nitrogen fertiliser is less than the risk of losing yield through not having enough, then what is the harm? Why would a grower reduce their insurance or luxury fertiliser if the improved profit margin isn't that great? A grower will often decide on a fertiliser rate across their farm relative to the maximum yield potential. However, not every field can reach this potential due to other constraints, and this leaves a slack in the system each season. Leaving that slack in the system may make sense at that level, but the extra N not used by the crop is going somewhere. At the moment, the Australian cotton industry is viewed as a low producer of greenhouse gas emissions. But there is a very real risk that this perception could shift. The industry needs to demonstrate that we're being as efficient as possible with our fertiliser use while still producing a high yielding and quality product. And is that extra nitrogen stored in the soil for subsequent crops? In the Gwydir, we had a bit of a look at that. We ended up with some very high treatment rates. The top one was 560, and the yield was within 0.1 of a bale per hectare across the three, so no significant difference there. The red, so this is the yield, the yield over here, and these are the nitrogen left in the soil in the 0 to 30 centimetre profile at the end, which was 22, 30 and 32. So for a lot of extra nitrogen put on, there wasn't a lot left over. In the Namoi, again, the yields achieved indicate there were no significant differences, and there were no nitrogen inefficiencies. They had enough. So, for example, we had a yield of 13 bales per hectare achieved in the 160 kilograms of N per hectare applied treatment. So again, what is happening in the mineralisation in the soil to allow for adequate nitrogen in that crop if it's not coming from the applied fertiliser? Down south, Kieran had the only trial on a bankless irrigation system. Again, he found no significant difference between the yields on the 100, 200, 250 and 300 kilo treatments. He achieved the best nitrogen fertiliser use efficiency result of 15.2 kilos of lint per kilo of nitrogen applied in the 200 unit treatment. Another thing that would like to be explored down south is the agronomic drawbacks to having too much nitrogen. Is defoliation being hampered by excessive vegetative growth? So that's something that Kieran's going to look into a bit more as well. I'll talk now a little bit about the Action on the Ground project. So these were trials conducted at Gwydir, Emerald and Moree by New South Wales DPI. The Moree site was on the same site, the same field, same plots as the RDO trial, which meant that we could get some results for how much was being lost, how much nitrous oxide was being lost to the atmosphere. So in this column is the kilos of nitrous oxide emitted on a per hectare basis. We need to note that these numbers are not exact because the chambers obviously can't cover the whole area. So the chambers were out for the whole period from planting to picking. The next column is the emissions factor. So the emissions factor that has recently been adopted for Australian irrigated cotton is 0.55%, and that was actually measured at the Gwydir site. That was pretty much on par. And the Emerald site was less at 0.2%. The high emissions factor in the high treatment at Moree is typical of the exponential increase in rates of nitrogen losses at rates far in excess of what that crop was required. And most of this loss was recorded after the variable rate of 200 kilos was applied. So in the right-hand column, we're looking at kilos of nitrogen per hectare. So we've converted it. There is no fixed ratio for N2 to N2O losses during denitrification. And recent research has shown that the ratio can range from a 1 to 100, depending on soil type, pH, environmental conditions, and various other factors. But this does give you a rough idea. So I've multiplied these by 40 because it's an average ratio used for alkaline clay soils, such as the Moree site. So that gives you an idea of the relative kilos of nitrogen lost during denitrification. So another action on the ground project through the Filling the Research Gap program was conducted again on the same site, so we had 3 trials on top of each other. And this one looked at nitrous oxide emissions in the irrigation water, and this was also conducted at Gwydir and at ACRI by the CSIRO. So Dr. Ben McDonald and Yvonne Cheng looked after that project. So here are some results. Basically, the right-hand column shows us the total kilos of N lost in this pathway. We need to note there's only 5 irrigations actually measured, 4 were missed, and irrigation 3 and 4 had water run urea. So most of the nitrogen would have been lost in the first 2 irrigations, but we could estimate that grand total of 44 to actually be a bit higher in reality. So we did that. The water was sampled during each irrigation and sent for lab testing. We also took extra samples and they were tested directly after collection using nitrate and nitrite strip tests. Yvonne's just going to set up out the front just to demonstrate how easy that test is to do on farm by any grower or consultant, and then hand them around. And comparing the lab results and the strip test, they were pretty much bang on and a lot cheaper and easier to do the strip tests. So a really good little tool there to measure your losses in your irrigation water. The results from the action in the ground and Filling the Research Gap trials indicate that, yes, there is in fact a whole lot of gas and a reasonable amount literally going down the drain. Of course, it depends on your farm setup. The tailwater containing the extra nitrogen could be used on the next field, and often is, or usually is. Dr. Ben McDonald has been doing some other research looking at residence time in tailwater, so how long you've got to use that nitrogen in that tailwater and how long it hangs around. The Regional Development Officers will be broadening this test in the coming season, doing some strip tests in their trials to hopefully get some more data on that. So this grower, from the results that we collected, their irrigation management is pretty good. They don't have long irrigation times. They're pretty accurate with that. They're now looking at possibly placing their gas deeper. At the moment they're going to the side of the hill, maybe try and get below the furrow line and hill up afterwards and see if that will help. So how do we become more efficient? The message is not as simple as reducing the amount of nitrogen fertiliser that is applied to the crop. We need to have a good handle on mineralisation. This coming season, the RDOs will be working with Dr. Francois Visser to collect some data to provide us with a better understanding of this. We'll be carrying out some sampling and on-farm testing across the regions, looking at mineralisation. So if that's something you'd like to do on your farm, please contact your local RDO. The more data we can get on this, the better, to get some baseline data. We need to understand losses from the system better. This requires optimisation of our irrigation systems, not only for water use efficiency, but for nitrogen use efficiency. It also involves looking closely at placement and timing of fertiliser. We need to consider how we can be more responsive in season. As I mentioned, the RDOs will this year be incorporating PDL tests into their trials to better understand the opportunities here. So they'll be testing them through affecting their treatments according to the PDL test results. So if you would like to do some in-strip testing, mineralisation testing, conduct a rate trial, or maybe have another idea on how you can become more efficient with your nitrogen fertiliser use, please let us know, and we'd love to help you out and test that. Thank you.